Hello and welcome to the 22nd episode of the Leadership and Construction Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and today we're joined by the absolute brilliant David Stitt. David is a leadership coach from DSA. So David, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Great to be here.
Thank you ever so much for your time.
Thanks for inviting me.
No, it's brilliant. I'm really looking forward to this one. So I want to start off like I do with every single podcast, but just sort of asking you, first of all, how is it that you got into construction and how is it that you got into sort of leadership coaching?
Right. I'm going to go back 45 years, Michael. I left school at 16 with one O-level, art. And my ambition at that stage was not to go down a coal mine and not to work in the shipyards. And that's all that seemed to happen in the Northeast back in the early 70s. I played golf from probably about 10 years old. And so I was okay by the time I got to 16. And a week after leaving school, not knowing what I was going to do, I was playing golf with a guy and he said to me, "What are you doing, Dave?" And I said, "Well, I'm playing golf with you." He said, No, what are you doing in your career?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Right, well, how do you fancy being a trainee civil engineer?" And I said to him, "Well, what's one of them?" And he said, "Well, it's noisy, it can be a bit dirty, you get to see the world, you don't get paid very much, but it's a fantastic career. You actually get things done, you see things being built." And I said, "Right, okay then, well, yeah, okay, let's go for it." And at the time, I was going out with a girl who's been my partner ever since. And her mother was a careers teacher. And I said to her mother, Maury, "What's a civil engineer?" She said, "Dave, it's a wonderful job, fantastic job, go for it." She told me 20 years later that she didn't have a clue what civil engineering was. So I started work with this guy, and I was basically, he called me trainee civil engineer, but I was basically a chain boy. You know, I held the end of the tape and the staff for the site engineers to do their work, and made tea and got the chips and that kind of stuff for about a year. And after a year, he said to me, "Dave, I'm leaving. You got to get yourself another job." So he wrote me this fantastic reference, and I found myself in an interview with a guy in Taylor Woodrow. And so he asked me about what I'd been doing the last year, told him. And he said, "Right, what do you do in your home life?" And I said, "Well, I play golf." And he said, "What's your handicap?" And so I told him. And he said, "Right, you've just increased your chances of getting this job by 75%. And the day after, I got a letter saying start on this big project as a junior site engineer in a fortnight's time." And so basically I was dropped in it, and I've kind of dropped myself in it ever since. I've kind of pushed myself hard, and having left school at 16, promising myself I would never study and never take an exam ever again, I've not stopped for the last 45 years. So there you go. So I joined Taylor Woodrow at 17, and the guy who took me on kind of went like that up in the organization, and he was really interested in me, and he kind of supported me, and I kind of went with him. And I got to a level in Taylor Woodrow that I was just a bit stuck, and I got headhunted. I moved to another company, great company called Burse, and they started an organizational change program in the early 90s, which I just fell for hook, line, and sinker. And it was a coaching transformation program. And because I was so enthusiastic, I found myself on the internal coaching the coaches program. It was a program with 10 participants, and we were trained up to be coaches, so that when the external coaches left, we were able to keep the momentum going in the organization. So that's when I was, this is kind of mid-90s, that's when I was introduced to coaching. And I have to say, Michael, it changed my life. I became less interested in bricks and blocks and concrete, the technical stuff, and more interested in people, and in particular teams. So I continued in Burst for about another year or so as in a kind of a dual role, as an internal coach working with internal business boards, and also in my operational role, which by that time I was ops manager in the north. And then I got headhunted again, and I left and joined Waits Construction as the ops manager in the north. And after about 6 or 7 months, their managing director heard that I had this change leadership experience. And he asked me to run the change program, the transformation program across the whole of Waits, which was an amazing experience. I did that for about a year and a bit. And it was round about the time when the Egan report came out. And I ran this program for about a year. And I would say it only ever got into the bloodstream by 30 or 40%, but it completely changed the organization. And Sir James Waits, who's now the chairman, recently said that it laid the foundations for the organization that Waits have become. And anyway, at the time, it was kind of seen as an exemplar of Egan type change. And so I got to speak on a lot of platforms in London about what Waits were doing. And so I got to meet a lot of people, and it was a great experience for me. It really worked with Waits. It tripled their profitability, and they've gone on to become one of the top construction companies in the UK. So early 2001, that program was inside of Waits was deemed to be a success, and it was no longer an initiative. It was the way we do business around here. So we put the team of people that I had working on this program with me back into into operational roles, and they all got a promotion from where they entered this program. And then the question was, well, what are we going to do with me? So we had quite a few conversations, and in the end, I kind of pushed them to set me free, because I wanted to start coaching across the industry for those that were prepared to could see the benefit and prepared to pay for it. So I left Waits in 2001. 20 years ago, and set up my own business, and here I am. And so nowadays, I run my own business, DSA Building Performance Limited, and we work with boards of directors and big project leadership teams in the UK construction industry, helping them to articulate where they want to get to in the future, helping them to identify where they are now, recognizing the gap, and then I take them through a process from here to where they want to get to. A process of team development, which has matured over the last 20 years. So that's me. That's how I entered the industry. That's how I got here, and it's been a fantastic journey. People ask me when I'm going to retire. Well, I'm never going to retire. I still see myself on the bottom rung of my career ladder, 45 years on, and there's much more out in front of me than there is behind. So that's kind of that's my spirit. That's my worldview.
That's absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and I think I share a lot of that worldview, like yourself, and I think it's extremely interesting to sort of listen to that and sort of hear that a lot of people in the construction industry now, or getting into the construction industry now, don't quite understand the sort of history of the construction industry and the evolution it's sort of gone through since the sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, and into, you know, the sort of 21st century. So, I mean, as you mentioned about the Egan report, and that those that don't know even the Latham report, they're definitely worth a read, because those are two sort of pinnacle reports that sort of started to change the sort of behaviors and ethos of the construction industry, sort of trying to drive productivity and drive collaboration and cooperation. So just, you know, what from your view was the construction like, you know, 80s, early 90s, before the Egan report came through? You know, what was the sort of attitudes between consultants, contractors and clients, contractors and suppliers and subcontractors? What was the sort of behaviors like, and how has that sort of changed, you know, going into this sort of early 21st century?
It's an interesting, good question. So the Latham report came out in 1994, and then the Egan report by a different government came out in 1998. I have to say, Michael, that the UK government have been looking at industry reform for at least the last 50 years, 50. And there's been report after report after report, kind of putting forward a compelling argument as to why the construction industry in particular needs to change. I kind of got really excited about this change process when I first came across the Latham report, and even more excited about it when I read the Egan report and some of the reports since then. So coming back to your question, if I relate to my experience, I joined the construction industry at 16 in 1976. And it was an incredibly adversarial industry. Contractors would scramble around to try and win work. And therefore, they would bid very low, because most work was procured on price. And then they would look for change and differences from the documents they bid against to recover money and to make their margin. And even now, construction industries work on 1%, 2%, 3% margins. So very, very low margins. And it only takes one or two bad jobs to turn a profitable year into a loss-making year for a contractor, because the margins are so thin. So certainly the early part of my experience in the construction industry, we're probably talking until mid-90s, it was kind of really aggressive, really driven, really adversarial, argumentative, lots of things going wrong, blaming other people for things going wrong, trying to recover money for things going wrong, working for a contractor. And so the client's team was set up to defend all of that. First line of defense is attack. So both sides are kind of attacking each other. And that was the construction industry. I think Latham reform and Egan reform, and a lot of the change in demographics over the years, millennial culture, things like that, diversity and inclusivity. I think it's softened the approach in the construction industry, though it is still now adversarial, still now predominantly price driven. And in terms of how we actually build things, digging holes and placing concrete and erecting steel. It's very much the same as when I joined 45 years ago. Lots of things have changed. A lot more of our work is procured in frameworks, in big packages of work. And that gives contractors a chance to set out their stall. It gives contractors a chance to have a slightly longer term view, because they can see a pipeline of work 2 or 3 or 5 years ahead of them. So I would say that the industry now is more polite. They don't shout and bawl and bollock and bite to the extent when I was growing up in the industry. But I would say the default conversation in construction is still command and control. It and holding people compliant, albeit it's done very subtly and it's done very politely. Managers tell staff what to do. Do this. And what I've learned over the last 20 years is that when we tell somebody what to do, they stop thinking. The brain stops thinking and they just follow orders. And so I come across, really committed, really willing, hardworking managers now who say to me, why do I have to do all the thinking around here? And the reason why they have to do all the thinking around here is their people have stopped thinking because they're telling them what to do all the time, rather than enable people to work things out for themselves. So this is, I could go off on one here, Michael. This is like a real hobby horse for me, a real passion for me, about changing this default conversation of command and control to a more enabling style of conversation, which we'll probably talk about, no doubt.
Absolutely. I mean, that's just exactly what I was going to say. I fell into that trap that you just mentioned around telling people what to do. And very early on in sort of my role as a leader, people stopped voicing ideas. And I was very much one of those managers going around, well, why am I doing everything? Why have I got to do this and do that? And that's because I wasn't empowering the people I was working with. And so my views on that has completely flipped. And so I completely see it from your perspective. And that's what I try to live up every single day, is empowering and sort of coaching people to take ownership and to learn these skills. Because I think the one thing that I sort of realized as I started to learn more about leadership is, as you become a leader, it's all about giving the people that you lead the space and the freedom to be able to work up solutions, work up creations themselves, and really take ownership of it. And my role has pretty much ironically become to do me out of a job, because I want to get to a position where you no longer need me around. And that's the kind of sort of ethos of kind of what a leader tries and strives to try and do. So my views have all sort of changed. But like you, I couldn't agree more that the conversations between clients, consultants, contractors, suppliers, manufacturers, whatever, they're all very polite. But there is still, where are you hiding something? Where have we, holding back information? Where haven't we been honest? There's still this slight of dishonesty around a few things. And I've not been in the industry for as long as 40 years. I've been in for nearly 15 years. And I've seen that as well. So we haven't quite got to that position in the industry where we are fully collaborative and work together and trust one another. There are examples of that, and there are examples of when we can really work well together. And those examples are when people are really open and really honest, and don't hold back things and hold themselves accountable when they make a mistake. And then, so if I was to make a mistake on a procurement document or a tender document or something like that, and then that had affected the cost, I don't have a contractor coming in going, yeah, right, we're going to pin him down on this now. Fantastic. We've got him over a barrel. I don't get that. When those projects have gone really well, and the relationship maintains for years, is where you work together. You don't you don't judge people for mistakes. You support one another. Obviously, if there is a mistake and the contractor's liable more time and more money, well, then I've got to hold my hands up and be honest about that and face up to that, rather than trying to find a way around it. Oh, wait a minute, but if you look at this clause in this contract, actually, let's just be honest. Let's just be real about this. This isn't. The minute I start to come to the table trying to pin a contractor down and they try to pin me down, it just doesn't work anymore. And it was interesting, really. One of the things that the probably most common sort of contract in the civil engineering industry or construction industry is the NEC contract, and one of the that's sort of championed by Latham, and one of the sort of crown jewels in NEC contracts is this early warning process, people still sort of see that sometimes as a way of setting up for a claim. I'm going to bung in an early warning, and people don't use it right. And I think we've got detached from what the early warning process is meant to drive a sort of behavior and culture where I look out for you and you look out for me. And I don't think as an industry really insensitize people to look out for one another, give early warnings, so we probably need to work more at that, because we're still, as you say, very much driven by cost and contract and program, too much that we set too many goals and too many deadlines that it's almost impossible to meet and meet all these challenges. So these are sort of examples of where the industry has made some ground, but we, as you say, we've still got this ethos, this history of, we're in a way still out to get one another, and I think the millennials now, I don't say that, but I am one, born in 1988, so I can't escape that. I think potentially our upbringing and our worldview is sort of starting to sort of try and change that. And the more and more people I meet, especially from sort of a similar sort of generation, we kind of just want to more get on than stab one another in the back. And we're much honest, probably sometimes more honest than we should be. But it's about getting a really great product and a really good project. It's not about trying to make a quick buck. It's really about trying to look after one another and develop relationships, develop trust. And so, one thing I'm really sort of scared about in terms of the future for the construction industry, that this older sort of behavior of, trying to pin one down and look, stabbing each other in the back will sort of just continue. I think we've got to move away from this and more start to work together more with one another. And hopefully, through things like what you're doing in terms of coaching and leadership, which is why, all your background and all your history is fantastic, because it's an example of where we've come from as an industry and where we don't want to go back to. And so we're in a really great position right now, and a position of opportunity to sort of completely change that industry and completely get to a point where we do look out for one another with some great leadership. That's what it takes. It takes great leadership. Do you agree with that?
So 100%. So Michael, it sounds quite grand, but my personal mission, something I've been working on for 25 years, is to change the construction industry from that place to the place that you're talking about. And so I've been, for the last 20 years, I've been working top down, trying to change the construction industry tiny little bit by tiny little bit by working with leadership teams. My theory is if I can get the leadership team really working together tight as a team, then they will lead effectively, and that will deliver a great project. It's a bit like the fish rots from the head. So if the head's rotten, the rest of it's going to be rotten. If the head's great, then you've got a chance. So the last 20 years, I've been working top down with big project leadership teams. And about a year ago, I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and said, yeah, Dave, you're doing okay. But at this current rate, you've got about another 900 years worth of work. to make any sort of impression. And excuse me. And so I thought, well, I'm kind of serious about this mission, but I haven't got 900 years left. So what am I going to do? And I'd kind of read quite a bit about how, the young professionals look at things differently. And so I thought, right, okay then. So I've learned a lot about conversations and how to have effective conversations through the coaching work I've done over the last 25 years. And so I thought, if I can change the conversation, the default conversation, to a more enabling, more effective one, if I can do that at scale and over time, then maybe that's another way of, delivering on my mission. So I'm now working ground up. I'm working with, let's call them Y generation or millennials, young professionals, 25 to 39, and I'm training thousands of them in the essentials of a coaching conversation, where you ask questions, where you listen, and you enable the other person to work it out for themselves rather than telling them. And so, and the idea is training thousands of young professionals in this coaching style of management is to get to them early, before they're kind of locked into the system of command and control, but also to help them in their current job, so they can do their current job better by having more effective conversations. And so they can become an effective manager. And over time, they become a great leader. So if I can do this at scale, like thousands, over time, years, then those people are going to be having different conversations. And that's going to spread, and that's going to change the industry from the bottom up. And I'm still working with leadership teams, top down, and I might just meet myself in the middle at some stage.
Yeah.
So this is a program. It's called Coach for Results, and what you and I are about, and what most of the fantastic people who join the construction industry are about, they're about results. They want to get stuff done. They want to get projects built, and so this is using a coaching approach to get jobs built. Coach for Results. And so I was having this conversation with a lady called Caroline Gumble, who's the chief executive of the Chartered Institute of Building. And she says, wow, fantastic. This is what the industry needs. This is what underpins our charitable status as the Chartered Institute of Building. How can we do this together? How can we support you in this? So I've produced the program, and it's now being delivered on the Chartered Institute of Building's Academy platform. And it starts on the 15th of June, and there's an early bird discount up until the 15th of May. And if I'm really honest with you, Michael, I'm not interested in training 20 people. I'm really interested in training thousands of people. So I'm looking to have 1,000 people on this program and do it 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, for the next 4 or 5 or 6 years. And we'll build up a movement of young professionals and older professionals who want to re-chip their management style, because quite often their current management style is the one thing that's holding them back.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about it. There's quite a bit of traction growing in the industry. We've one of the guys who wrote one of the government reports, Modernise or Die, Mark Farmer, he's wrote a brilliant endorsement of this program on LinkedIn. He's kind of behind it. So we're getting some of the guys at the top end of the industry who are endorsing and supporting, and so I'm really excited about it. And there's no guarantees. It might not work. I think it will.
Yeah.
I think it will. So I'm just giving it my best. I'm giving it a good try.
No, it sounds amazing, because I think you're right. I think it is what the industry needs. And I think, as I say, what I was mentioning earlier is that's what I'm scared about in terms of this industry is trying to attract people into this industry purposefully, that they be an industry where people want to come into. Like yourself, I sort of fell into engineering or construction completely by accident, and it wasn't a career I thought that's what I want to go and do. So I really want that to change, and I really want the culture in which to change, and I think it needs to change in order for people to see this as an industry that they should come and work for. And as you mentioned, how we dig a hole and put concrete in it hasn't changed for decades. I'm still using the same design standards as I was at the beginning of my career. It's really not fundamental. The basic principles of engineering have not changed, but what sort of millennials and later generations can sort of offer to the construction industry is that fresh way of thinking, different way of doing things. The same way of how we've built things over the last 100, 200 years doesn't mean that's the way we're going to build it for the next 200 years. The world is changing, society is changing. How we travel, how we work is completely changing. And so certainly what we need from our infrastructure and what we need from the construction industry is changing. So we do, and we as I say, we lose this opportunity if we don't attract those generations into the construction industry to bring their absolute best of what they can offer. Then the society will suffer, because we won't be building things that people will need. We won't be building things in the way that need to be built, and I don't want to pick out certain projects, but, major schemes, certainly within the UK, always end up running over budget and over time, and it does nothing for promoting the industry for people to come into.
So look, Michael, in this conversation, this is a leadership podcast, right? So honestly, I don't want to talk about contracts. I don't want to talk about technology. In this conversation with you, I want to talk about people and culture, because that's what leadership's about. The art of leadership versus the science of management. Mm-hmm. The art of leadership is about creating the environment for success, creating the environment that will enable everybody who comes to work to do their best work. The science of management is about the organizational tools and techniques and budgets and schedules needed to get stuff done. So leadership is about creating the environment. And I remember a conversation I had with, so I'm talking culture with you, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going to talk technology. Mm-hmm. I remember a conversation I had with my very first coach, kind of 25, 26 years ago. And he looked at me in the eye and he said, "Dave, life is a conversation." And I said to him, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "Think about it." And so I've been thinking about it for 26, 27 years. Life is a conversation, eh? And so about a year ago, I was having a conversation with another person, and he said to me, "Dave, your success is a function of the conversations you're having, the conversations you're not having, and the way you're having them." And I thought, whoa, your success is about the conversations you're having, the conversations you're not having, and the way you're having them. And so as a coach, I've got a supervisor, and I was talking to my coaching supervisor about this, and she said, "Dave, put it into a formula. Put it into a formula." So here's my formula, Michael. So your capacity for success equals the conversations you're having minus the conversations you're not having, multiplied by the way you're having them, the quality of your conversations. So let's unpack that. The conversations you're having, whether you're talking about technology stuff, whether you're talking about people stuff, the conversations you're not having. Okay, so a fortnight ago, somebody upset you. They said something unwittingly that brassed you off. Right, I'm not talking to them anymore. So you're not having a conversation about what upset you. You're just not talking to that person. Or you're not having an honest conversation with a customer or a contractor. Okay, so your capacity for success is the conversations you're having minus the conversations you're not having, multiplied by the way you're having them. So the way you're having conversations is a multiplier. It's a multiplier. So if your conversations are all command and control and blame when it goes wrong, or if all of your conversations or most of your conversations are a coaching style conversation where you're asking questions predominantly, where you're listening, giving the other person a chance to think and work things out for themselves, that is a multiplier. So my shift in my own thinking was to shift away from trying to find the technical solution to how can we shift the conversation, change the conversation, change the world, change the industry. And I from what I've seen, I believe, and from what I've read, and I've read a lot, Harvard, Gallup, the analytics giant, what they're saying is young people want to be coached by their boss. They don't want to be told. Young people want to coach other people to get the best out of the situation from their team, for them, for themselves. And so coaching is a different style of conversation to the traditional management style. The other thing I find, Michael, is I work with, like the top end of the industry, some of the biggest projects in the UK, and at the moment, some of the biggest projects in the world. And so I'm working with incredibly successful people who are leading huge ventures. And my experience is the people that they're leading, they're all talking technical. They're all rushing around like headless chickens, trying to fight fires, trying to problem solve, and they're all talking technical. They're technically focused. And yet they're managers and they're leaders. And part of management, part of leadership is to be people focused. So nowadays I ask project managers, who's responsible for developing your staff? HR. That's kind of the most common answer I get when I ask that question. And I've asked HR, who's responsible for developing staff around here? Not us. And so at the moment, there's this kind of standoff between managers and HR. They're looking at each other, expecting each other to develop their staff. And in the meantime, young professionals are out there turning up, trying to get the job done, and they're getting no training other than statutory health safety training.
Yep.
And health, safety, and well-being, it tends not to be health and well-being, it tends to be safety, the statutory stuff. And this is predominantly, mostly what's going on in the training world. And these young professionals, they're a bit like Desert Island Dick. They're out there on their own, trying to make sense of all of this that's going on, trying to work out what they should be doing, because their manager is facing the other way. Their manager is facing the project and the technicalities of the project and the contract and the commercials, and not facing their staff. So part of what I'm trying to do as well is get the manager to turn around and start developing and bringing on and mentoring their staff, like I was. This guy who took me on all those years ago kind of put his arm around me and he kind of brought me on. And what I'm told now by young professionals is that they don't get that. Their bosses are too busy, sorting out technicalities, responding to 200 or 300 emails a day. Now, how can you respond to 200 or 300 emails a day, do your job, and develop your staff? And so what's happening is these senior people, these managers, their working day is getting longer and longer. They're doing emails at night, emails at weekends, emails on their holidays, and they just haven't got time for themselves. Never mind their young staff. So this is part of the challenge. This is part of the quickening of life. The acceleration that physical technology, along with all the benefits, has brought to the world. So if you draw a graph of physical technology over the last 200,000 years since we have been on the planet, it's been pretty flat, pretty flat, pretty flat, pretty flat, pretty flat. In the last 35 years, woof, exponential growth. And if you draw a graph beside it of social technology, that's how we cope as human beings. So your physical technology has gone like that. Social technology is flat. So what I'm talking about social technology is leadership, collaboration, building teams, working with each other, developing society, that type of stuff. Our skill at the social technology has gone like that, and physical technology has gone like that. So there's a huge gap between physical technology and social technology. And the net result of that gap is we can't keep up. Us human beings cannot keep up with the rate of pace of change that technology is bringing the world. And so we're on this hamster wheel, frantically trying to keep up. So my work, this program I'm doing, this top-down change, this bottom-up change, is all about developing social technology. How we, as human beings, get on with each other, get the best out of each other. How we lead, how we manage, how we grow and develop, how we inspire our colleagues. And this analysis between physical technology and social technology came from a book called, I think it's called Sorry for Being Late. And this guy has researched this, and he gives a great example. So a great example. Have you heard of Moore's Law before?
Yep.
You have?
Yep.
So this guy Moore was one of the early executives of Intel, the manufacturers of microprocessing chips. Mm-hmm. And in 1974, he predicted that the size of a microprocessor would halve every year, its processing capacity would double every year, and its cost would halve every year. It's called Moore's Law. And Moore's Law is true. It's been proven to happen. So the size of the microprocessing chip is halved every year. It's got twice as powerful every year, and it's half the cost every year. Compound growth. And so he gives an example of the humble VW Beetle in 1974. And he says that this guy from Intel, who's the chief executive of Intel 3 or 4 years ago, was reporting on this growth, Moore's Law, and said, if I can give you an example, people don't get how dramatic this change has been on the planet. He said, so if I can give you an example via the humble VW Beetle. So if the humble VW Beetle from 1974 had developed as fast as computers, the microprocessor chip, nowadays it would be able to do 300,000 miles an hour. You'd be able to run it on a tank of fuel for a whole human lifetime, and it would cost 3 cents to purchase. So that's a measure of the dramatic development of computer processing technology. And then when you add into that the applications we've got, 2009 smartphone, we can do more on that than the mainframe computer building at the college I went to in 1975, which was the size of 2 football pitches. You can do more on that than the mainframe computer building at Hatfield Polytechnic in 1979. I remember my computer course as part of my civil engineering degree. We had to create an Excel spreadsheet, hand it into the reception at mainframe computer building, the size of 2 football pitches, and then 2 days later we would go back and we would get our spreadsheet, our calculation. We can do infinitely more on that, which we carry around in our pocket, than the whole of that size of 2 football pitches building. And that's a manifestation of physical technology. And what we can do now on smartphones, you would never have dreamt of. You know, the first mobile phone I had was the size of a car battery. There you go. And so physical tech, you know, the world has changed so dramatically and is changing at an exponential rate. And yet we as human beings, you know, we're not sufficiently evolved to live this life we're trying to live. Let me tell you a little bit about that. So Homo sapiens, us, you and I, have been on the planet for 200,000 years. And if you represent that 200,000 years as a book, right? Enlightened human beings, you and I, we represent, you know, the last 100 years represents the last sentence of this book. The last sentence of the last paragraph. The rest of human time, the majority of the rest of human time has been spent out on the Havana hunting and gathering. And so for all but 10,000 years of this 200,000 years, we human beings were out on the savannah hunting and gathering. And so we are not sufficiently evolved to live this life we're trying to live. And that's why there's so much mental health. That's why there's so much tension. That's why there's so much stress, because we're constantly trying to keep up with the world, with life. You know, our ability to cope, our social technology hasn't developed to any extent that the physical technology has. And so I'm not gonna write this all by myself, but I'm making a contribution. And my contribution is to keep working top down with leadership teams, but now bottom up with young professionals who I think are up for it. You know, the time's right. You know, they've got a different style of conversation. They want different things. You know, they're not as much driven by the way I was driven by things, you know, material possessions, cars, big houses, you know, job title, office with my name on the door. Young professionals want to succeed, but they're not for those kind of reasons. They've got a different kind of approach, I am told, by people like yourself. So this is my ongoing mission. And this is what brings you and I together here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in a small way, as I say, the podcast and what I'm trying to do is part of my contribution as well. So you're absolutely right. And I couldn't agree with you more. And those analogies are brilliant and really help paint that picture of where we've come from and where we're going. Yeah. So we need to unfortunately start to bring this podcast to a close. And the last question that I ask every single guest, I'm going to ask you, which is, what do you think is the most important aspect of leadership?
So Michael, nowadays I'm a student of leadership. I work with executives, I work with leaders of big projects, and I watch what they do. I watch because I'm their coach. I'm noticing all the time what they're doing, how they're going about getting the best out of their people. And I read lots of books on the subject, have read lots of books on the subject. I was actually once in a leadership position myself, and I have to tell you, the world's in a better place with me doing this than with me trying to be a leader. I wasn't very good at it. So I'm more of a student of leadership now. And so one of the biggest insights that I've had was the actual definition of leadership. And if you Google definition of leadership, there's about 3 million responses. But I remember reading a book, and I think it was by a guy called Charles Handy, who is one of the few British leadership gurus. And he defined leadership as 3 things. Firstly, having a vision of where we want to get to. Secondly, knowing where we are now, location. And then thirdly, inspiring the troops to get from one to the other. So leadership is about knowing where we want to get to, having a vision, being grounded in the present, knowing where we are now, and then inspiring people. And so it's about inspiration. And for me, inspiration is raising spirits. And I ask people, I ask leaders, what raises your spirits? And sometimes they look at me and go, I don't know. And then I say to them, well, why am I even asking you this question? Why am I asking you about what raises your spirits? I don't know, Dave. Well, the reason why I'm asking you is, if you don't get it, you cannot give it. So if you're not inspired, then you can't inspire anybody. If you're walking through life like this, that ain't going to inspire anybody. And you're a leader. So you've got to get it. There's something you got to find out what raises your spirits, whether it's standing on the top of a mountain, taking in the countryside, whether it's swimming in the sea or listening to a beautiful piece of music, or helping young people, thrive and develop. Whatever raises your spirits, if you don't get it, you cannot give it. So for me, leaders have got to be inspired. And they've got to find out what inspires them. So I would suggest to your listeners, to your viewers, just keep an eye on yourself for the next fortnight and notice when your spirits go up. And then ask yourself, right, what did it? What raised my spirits? And then get more of that. So be inspired. And if you are inspired, you will inspire lots of people just by your being.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely brilliant. David, I can't thank you enough. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been a great conversation. So thank you ever so much.
Fantastic. And all the best, Michael, with your career and with this great thing you're doing, interviewing, people with, views on leadership. It's wonderful. Great work.
Thank you ever so much. And I really do hope it helps people very much like what you're doing. So thank you ever so much. One last quick one. In terms of the course you were talking about with the Chartered Institute of Builders, where can we find that? They presumably at their website?
Okay, so if you just go to Google and search Coach for Results, Chartered Institute of Building Academy, that'll take you to the Academy website. Or if you go to my website, which is dsabuilding.co.uk, it's kind of emblazoned on the front, on the homepage.
Fantastic. That's
dsabuilding.co.uk.
Brilliant. David, thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Michael. Have a great day.
Cheers.